My name is Bessie. I am 64 years old, and until that Tuesday morning in October, I believed I knew my son. I believed I understood the man I had raised, the boy I once cradled through sickness, the boy I sacrificed my youth for. I thought blood meant loyalty. That morning shattered everything. I was in the garden, kneeling among my roses. The late bloomers were stubborn this year, fighting for color before the frost came. I had dirt under my nails, the cool air biting at my cheeks, when I heard it, the sound of tires crunching across my driveway. The growl of an engine I knew well, Terrence's SUV. But something felt wrong. The slam of the doors carried no warmth, only urgency, only weight. I rose slowly, brushed the soil from my apron, and stepped around the house. On the porch stood my son and his wife, Lennox. Not with smiles, not with light chatter, with baggage. Literal baggage. 2 large suitcases rested at Lennox's side, polished and new. And Terrence, my boy, was dragging more bags from the trunk. "Mom," he called out. His voice cracked under pressure. "We need to talk." The words hung heavy. I studied his face. His shirt wrinkled, his tie crooked, the sparkle in his eyes dulled, replaced by shadows. Exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. Lennox, though, Lennox was flawless. Hair done, makeup sharp, dressed as though the world couldn't touch her. Perfectly controlled, perfectly cold. "What's going on?" I asked, unlocking the door with a trembling hand. My heart already knew something was coming, something I would not like. They followed me inside. Their footsteps echoed across the hardwood, a hollow sound that filled my chest with dread. Lennox's eyes scanned my living room like a predator, measuring, calculating, as if the space was already hers. Terrence sank into my husband's old recliner, shoulders heavy. The same chair where his father once sat before death stole him from us 5 years ago. I poured coffee I had brewed earlier. My hands were steady, though my pulse was not. "I'm listening," I said. Terrence looked at Lennox. She gave him a small nod, the kind of nod that controls, that decides. He took a breath. "We sold the house." The words didn't just fall. They landed with force, like smoke suffocating a room. I set my cup down carefully, the soft clink against the saucer louder than it should have been. "Which house?" I asked, though a pit in my stomach already screamed the answer. "Our house," he said. His eyes dropped, his voice weaker now. "The one on Maple Street. The Colonial. The house I had helped them buy. The one where I poured $40,000 from my retirement savings into the down payment. The house I thought would keep them safe, secure, building a life together. Gone. The Maple Street house wasn't just theirs. It was mine too. My sweat, my weekends, my aching back pressed into every corner of it. I had painted those walls until my arms went numb, dug my hands into the earth planting flowers Lennox never even watered, let alone appreciated. That house was family, history, roots. "You sold it." My voice came out small. Smaller than I wanted. Fragile. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you even ask if you should sell?" Lennox finally spoke. Her voice cut through the room like glass. "We didn't need permission, Bessie. It was our house." Her tone was cold, calculated. But underneath it, something slick, something that made my stomach turn. "I understand it was yours," I answered slowly, measuring each word. "But you told me you wanted to stay there long term. You said it was the perfect place to raise children. That's what you promised me." Terrence shifted, eyes darting away. He couldn't look at me. "Plans change, Mom." "How much?" I asked. $620,000, Lennox said before Terrence could open his mouth. Her lips curled as if she were sharing good news. Almost proud. The number hit me hard. $620,000. More money than I had earned in a decade before I retired. My breath caught, my chest heavy. That's wonderful," I managed, forcing a smile that felt wrong. "So where will you move? A bigger place? Maybe closer to good schools?" Silence. The kind of silence that presses down on your lungs until breathing hurts. Terrence stared at his hands. Lennox admired her nails. Actually, Mom, Terrence said at last. His voice was barely above a whisper. We were hoping we could stay here. With you. Just temporarily. Until we figure things out. I blinked. Certain I misheard. Stay here. He rushed in, desperate. It'd only be for a little while. A few months maybe. We won't be any trouble. My blood chilled. What happened to the money from the sale? The silence this time was worse. It wasn't empty. It was dangerous. Well, Lennox said smoothly, tugging at her skirt as if the conversation bored her. I had some expenses. Things I needed to take care of. What kind of expenses? I pressed. Personal things, she said, her clipped tone warning me not to ask again. But I wasn't ready to let her off that easily. Lennox, you just sold a house for over $600,000. What could you possibly? I bought some jewelry, she interrupted, her voice sharp, almost triumphant. Clothes. Got my car detailed. Upgraded the interior. Took a spa trip to California with my sister. Paid off my credit cards. I stared at her, waiting for more. Waiting for some kind of sense. None came. Something cold settled deep inside me. How much jewelry? I asked quietly. Does it matter? She snapped. It was my money to spend. Your money? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Terrence finally lifted his head. Mom, please. We just need a place to stay while we get back on our feet. Back on your feet? My voice cracked, then rose. Terrence, you had over $500,000 in your hands. How are you not standing taller than ever right now? It's complicated, he muttered. I looked at him, at her, and in that moment I saw them clearly, maybe for the first time. My son, the boy I raised to think before acting, sitting in my living room without a home. And Lennox, dressed in what looked like a brand new outfit, probably worth more than my monthly check from Social Security. Where did all the money go, Lennox? I asked again, my voice firmer. She rolled her eyes. I told you. Expenses. $620,000 worth of expenses? It's not your business, Bessie. Something inside me snapped. My voice cut like steel. It became my business the moment you showed up at my door asking to live under my roof. Terrence dropped his head into his hands. Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder than it has to be. I rose to my feet, my untouched coffee trembling on the table. Terrence, help me understand this. You had a beautiful home. You had money in the bank. And now you come to me, your 64-year-old mother, because your wife spent it all on jewelry and spa trips? It wasn't just jewelry and spa trips, Lennox said, defensive now. I had debts to pay. What debts? Credit cards. How much? Her eyes burned into mine. Enough. I felt like the room was tilting, like the walls were pressing in. My chest tightened, air refusing to fill my lungs. Drowning. That's the only word for it. Terrence, I whispered, forcing strength into my voice. Look at me. Slowly, my son lifted his head. And when our eyes met, my heart cracked. He looked hollow, defeated, embarrassed, and worse, resigned. Like he'd surrendered long before this conversation even began. How much debt did she have? I asked him directly. His shoulders sagged. He didn't want to say it. Mom. How much, Terrence? I pressed. He let out a long, heavy sigh. About 80,000. Credit cards. The number slammed into me. $82,000. My vision blurred. Well, what could she possibly buy with 80,000 on credit cards? Clothes, he said softly. His voice sounded like a confession. Shoes. Handbags. Vacations. Most of it before we even married. I turned to Lennox. She wasn't even looking at me. She sat there scrolling her phone, as if this wasn't her life unraveling in my living room. And the rest of the money? I asked Terrence, though my eyes stayed fixed on her. He hesitated. Then, quietly, she wanted to redecorate her sister's house. She bought her mom a car. And she, his voice trailed. She what? My words cut like ice. She wanted to invest in her friend's business, he finished. Finally, Lennox looked up, still not at me, but through me. Her voice was flat, dismissive.
A boutique.
It's going to be very successful. My stomach turned. How much did you invest? 300,000, she said. Not a flicker of shame. Not a crack in her voice. The figure hit me like a fist to the chest. 300,000. Half their fortunes sunk into a boutique. By a woman who had never worked, never managed a business, never shown interest in anything but shopping bags and spa menus. I felt my lips tremble. So let me get this straight. You sold your house for 620,000. 80 went to pay off Lennox's debts. 300 into a boutique. And the rest? I told you. Lennox finally met my eyes, irritation sparking. Expenses.
Jewelry.
Spa trips. The car. Some furniture for the shop. Gifts for my family. Things add up. I ran the numbers in my head, fast. Even with her expenses, there should have been 50,000, maybe more. Where's the rest of the money? I demanded. There's no rest, she snapped. It's gone.
Gone.
$620,000 vanished in months. Spent on glittering stones, meaningless trips, debts from a life of excess, and a boutique that would never see daylight. I sank into my chair, my bones aching with the weight of 64 years. This wasn't just money. This was my son. My values. Everything I taught him, wasted. And the woman who led him into ruin sitting smug in front of me. So now, I said slowly, you want to live here? Just temporarily, Terrence repeated. I looked around my small house. 2 bedrooms. 1 bathroom. A kitchen that barely held 2 people at once. 30 years of my labor built these walls. 30 years to pay off this mortgage. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, my retirement, my peace. And what's your plan? I asked. How do you intend to get back on your feet? They exchanged a look, a silent signal. Well, Lennox said smoothly, Terrence will keep working, and I'm sure the boutique will turn a profit soon. If not, she shrugged, her voice careless, we'll figure something else out. I stared at her, at the woman who convinced my son to burn through $500,000. She sat there like a queen, certain the world owed her comfort. No, I said, my voice low but steady. Terrence's head shot up. What? No, I repeated. You can't stay here. The air froze. The single word hung between us like a storm about to break. I saw my son's face crumble, his hope collapsing. But it was Lennox's reaction that chilled me. For a split second, her mask cracked. And what slipped through wasn't hurt, it was something darker. Cold. Calculating. Mom, you can't be serious, Terrence said, his voice rising, desperate. We're family. Yes, we are family, I said, my voice steadier than my heart. And that's exactly why I won't stand by and enable this disaster you've created. Lennox set her phone down hard on the coffee table. The sound cut through the room like a warning shot. What disaster, Bessie? My husband made a business decision. Not every investment pays off overnight. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Business decision? Spending $600,000 on jewelry, spa trips, and a boutique run by your friend is not business. It's recklessness. Her composure cracked. How dare you judge how I spend my money? It wasn't your money, I answered quietly, each word deliberate. It was equity from a home my son worked for, a home I helped him buy. Terrence pushed to his feet, pacing to the window. His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. Mom, we wouldn't ask if we had anywhere else to go. What about Lennox's family? I asked. Surely her parents. They live in a 1-bedroom condo, Terrence said quickly. And her sister doesn't have room. The same sister whose house Lennox spent thousands redecorating as a surprise? My tone sharpened. Lennox's eyes flashed, venom behind them. My personal relationships are none of your concern. I rose, my patience drained. They became my concern the moment you stood on my doorstep, asking for a place to live. You burned through my son's future on frivolous nonsense, and now you expect me to clean up the wreckage. It's not frivolous. Lennox shouted, springing to her feet. Her voice shook the walls. You wouldn't understand. You've lived in this tiny house your whole life, wearing the same old clothes, driving the same old car. You don't know what it's like to have standards. Her insult pierced deep, but I refused to bleed for her. No, Lennox, I don't know what it's like to spend other people's money on luxuries and then come crawling back when the money's gone. Terrence turned from the window, his face flushed with shame. Mom, please. I know Lennox made some mistakes. Mistakes? My voice cracked like a whip. Terrence, she spent over $600,000 in a matter of months. That isn't a mistake, it's a pattern. You don't know anything about our marriage, Lennox hissed. Her voice dripped with poison. You don't know what it's like to be married to someone who never wants to spend money on anything nice. I know what it means to live within my means, I shot back. I know what it means to save, to sacrifice, to buy something only when I've earned it, not to expect others to bankroll my life. Her face twisted with rage. Well, aren't you perfect, Bessie? The perfect mother who raised the perfect son who married the wrong woman. I never said that. You didn't have to, she sneered. It's written all over your face every time you look at me. And the truth was, she wasn't wrong. I had never liked Lennox. From the day Terrence brought her home 3 years ago, I'd seen it. Not her appearance, not her background. It was in her eyes. The mask she wore. The entitlement underneath. And now, the mask was gone. Lennox, I said carefully, I don't dislike you for who you are. I dislike the choices you make, and how those choices destroy my son. She spat back instantly. Your son is a grown man. He makes his own decisions. Really? I stepped closer. Because from where I'm standing, you make every decision, and he just follows. Mom, that's not fair. Terrence cut in, his voice strained. Isn't it? I turned to him. Tell me, Terrence, whose idea was it to sell the house? He hesitated. We discussed it together. Whose idea was it to throw $300,000 into a boutique? Another pause. His eyes flickered toward Lennox. She thought it was a good opportunity. And whose idea was it to pay off $80,000 in credit card debt you didn't even know existed until after you married her? His face flushed red. Mom, please. Answer me, Terrence. Who's been making the financial decisions in your marriage? He swallowed hard. We make them together, he whispered, weak. Lennox laughed. A sharp, ugly sound that bounced off the walls. Oh, please. Tell your mother the truth, Terrence. Tell her how you begged me to marry you. Tell her how grateful you were that someone like me would even look at someone like you. Her words poisoned the air. My blood ran cold. Someone like you. Yes. Lennox spat, her voice laced with venom. Someone beautiful. Someone sophisticated. Someone who could have had any man she wanted. Your son knows he won the lottery when he married me. I turned to Terrence, praying for some flicker of defiance, some trace of the man I raised. But his head hung low, eyes fixed on the floor, his shoulders caving in like a boy caught in a storm he couldn't withstand. Lennox pressed on, her words like knives. And now, when we need help, his own mother turns her back. What kind of mother does that? The kind who won't watch her son be destroyed by a manipulative woman, I answered, my voice rising despite the knot in my chest. That's when she crossed the line. You bitter old woman, she screamed. You're jealous because he chose me over you. You can't stand that he loves me more than his pathetic, lonely mother. Lennox, stop, Terrence whispered. But even his protest was hollow. She refused to stop. No, she needs to hear this. You're a miserable old hag, trapped in this shabby house, jealous of anyone who has more than you ever will. Guess what, Bessie? Your son doesn't need you anymore. He has me. Something inside me snapped. Years of silence, years of biting my tongue, years of watching this woman drain the light out of my son. It all collapsed into one sharp, final truth.
Get out, I said.
My voice was quiet, but the weight in it filled the room. What? Lennox blinked. I said, get out of my house. She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. You can't throw us out. We have nowhere else to go. That's not my problem. Mom, please. Terrence pleaded, his voice desperate. We really don't have anywhere else. You should have thought about that, I told him, before you let your wife spend your future on jewelry and spa treatments. Lennox stormed toward me, her face twisted with fury. You don't get to speak to me like that in front of my husband. This is my home, I said firmly, meeting her glare. And in my home, I'll speak the truth. Right now, I want you gone. We're not leaving, she hissed, folding her arms. Terrence, tell your mother we're staying. I looked at my son, the man I had raised to fight for what was right, the man I believed would protect the ones he loved. But the man standing in front of me wasn't that boy anymore. He was broken, beaten down so far he didn't even remember what strength felt like. Terrence, I said softly, please ask your wife to leave. He glanced between us, his face tormented. Mom, please, just let us stay a few days. Just until we figure something out.
No.
That single word shattered what was left of Lennox's composure. She exploded.
Fine.
You want to be a selfish, heartless bitch? Then we'll make sure everyone knows what kind of mother you really are. She stormed toward the front door and ripped it open so hard it slammed into the wall. My heart lurched as I saw the street outside, neighbors in their yards, heads turning toward the commotion. Mrs. Patterson across the street, the Johnsons next door, all of them looking. You want to know what kind of woman Bessie Mitchell is? Lennox shrieked, her voice echoing through the quiet block. She's throwing her own son onto the street, her own flesh and blood. Heat crawled up my cheeks as every pair of eyes landed on me. My private heartbreak was now a public spectacle. Lennox, stop, Terrence said, his voice finally cutting with a trace of authority. But it was too late. No, she screamed. Let them hear it. This woman raised a son who worked his whole life for a beautiful home, and when life got hard, when he needed help, she slammed the door in his face. Mrs. Patterson edged closer, straining to catch every word. All we asked for was temporary help, Lennox cried, her tears spilling, staged and practiced. Just a place to stay until we got back on our feet. And this heartless woman said no to her own child. I stood in my doorway, frozen, the weight of humiliation pressing into my bones. My quiet street, the place I'd built a life for 15 years, the place where my neighbors respected me, was now the stage for Lennox's twisted performance. That's enough, I said, stepping onto the porch, my voice steady though my chest burned. No, Lennox spat, spinning on me, eyes blazing. It's not enough. You think you're better than everyone else. But you're nothing more than a selfish old woman who can't stand to see other people happy. Lennox, stop this right now.
Why?
Because you're embarrassed? She leaned forward, her tone sharp, almost gleeful. Good. You should be embarrassed. And then she did it. The act that would change everything. In front of my neighbors. In front of God. In front of my own son. Lennox Mitchell raised her hand and slapped me across the face. The sound cracked through the street like a gunshot. I staggered back, hand pressed to my cheek. The sting was nothing compared to the shock. For a moment, silence swallowed the entire block. Even Lennox looked startled by what she had done. Mrs. Patterson gasped. The Johnsons' teenage boy shut off his mower mid-row, staring wide-eyed. People froze, watching. I turned to my son, my child, waiting for him to move, to step forward, to show some outrage that his wife had struck his mother. Nothing. Just confusion on his face, his body paralyzed. Did you just hit me? My voice came quiet, calm, but iron ran through every word. You deserved it, Lennox sneered, lifting her chin high. Throwing your own family out like garbage. I scanned the circle of neighbors, faces filled with disbelief, whispers carrying through the still air. Even the mailman had stopped mid-route, truck idling, his eyes fixed on us. Terrence, I whispered, my throat raw. Your wife just assaulted me. In front of everyone. His mouth opened, closed. Nothing. And you're going to stand there and let her? Mom, she's upset, he stammered. She didn't mean to slap me across the face? Lennox stepped closer, her glare sharp enough to cut. Don't you dare make yourself the victim, Bessie. You brought this on yourself.
Ich zerrte her.
This woman who had humiliated me,
Who had bled my son dry.
who had twisted him so far that he couldn't even defend his own mother. Get off my property, I said, my voice ablaze. Make me, she shot back, her lips curling. I turned to my son one last time, praying for a glimmer of the man I raised. But all I saw was a hollow shell, a man too beaten down to choose right over wrong. You have 5 minutes, I said coldly. Pack your things and leave. Or I call the police. You wouldn't dare, Lennox snapped, though I caught the flicker of fear in her eyes. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed. As the ring hummed in my ear, I watched the color drain from her face. She grabbed Terrence's arm, hissing, "Tell your mother to hang up."
Right now.
But I was already speaking to the dispatcher. Yes, I need officers at my address. I have trespassers on my property. One has just assaulted me. When I ended the call, Lennox stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. You actually called the police on your own son? No, I met her gaze, without flinching. I called them on the woman who struck me in front of witnesses. For the first time since I had known her, Lennox looked genuinely afraid. 10 minutes stretched into an eternity. Then flashing lights filled the street. 2 officers stepped out. Martinez, young, steady, with kind eyes, and Thompson, older, weary, a man who had seen too much of families tearing themselves apart. By then, Lennox had tried to compose herself, hair smoothed, face set, but the panic still glimmered behind her eyes. Terrence stood small beside the luggage, like a boy lost at the bus stop. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez said as she approached me gently. "We got a call about an assault?" "Yes." I touched my cheek, still burning. This woman slapped me. Officer Thompson's gaze cut to Lennox. "Is that true, ma'am?" "She was being unreasonable," Lennox said flatly. "We just needed a place to stay. She threw us out like trash." "That doesn't give you the right to hit anyone," Martinez said firmly, her tone unshakable.
She turned to me.
"Do you want to press charges?" I looked at my son, the boy I raised, the man I sacrificed for. And I saw nothing but silence, his head bowed, unable to defend me, even now. "Yes," I said softly. "I want to press charges." Lennox's face drained white. "You can't be serious." "Assault is serious," Officer Thompson replied, his voice flat. "And we've got multiple witnesses." All around, my neighbors stood firm. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, her voice clear. "I saw it. She hit Bessie, right across the face. Unprovoked."
Lennox spun, desperate.
This is ridiculous. But her defiance was cracking. And for once, she knew she'd gone too far. "She's my mother-in-law," Lennox snapped, her voice sharp with desperation as the officers guided her toward the patrol car. "This is a family matter."
A dispute.
That's all. Officer Martinez didn't even flinch. "Family or not, assault is assault. You'll need to come with us." Lennox jerked against their hold, her eyes darting wildly to Terrence. "Don't just stand there. Do something." But Terrence didn't move. He just stood there, rooted to the spot, his face pale, his body heavy, like every ounce of strength had drained out of him. Then his eyes found mine. And in them, I thought I saw blame. "Mom," he said, his voice thin, "did you really have to?" "Yes." The word cut sharp, leaving no room for doubt. "I really had to. Your wife assaulted me. In front of the entire neighborhood.
And you stood there.
You did nothing." "She's my wife," his voice cracked. "And I'm your mother," I said, my throat tight. "But apparently that doesn't mean anything to you anymore." Officer Thompson approached then, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Mitchell, we'll need you at the station later for a formal statement. Can you come down this afternoon?"
Yes.
"I'll be there." The patrol car pulled away, Lennox in the back seat, her face pale but defiant. I watched until the red and blue lights disappeared down the street. When I turned back, Terrence was lifting his suitcases into the trunk of his SUV. His movements were slow, mechanical, like a man moving through a fog. "Where will you go?" I asked. Despite everything, I still asked. He shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe a hotel tonight." "With what money?" The question landed between us like a stone. We both knew the truth. He had nothing left. He couldn't run forever. "Terrence," I said softly, "this doesn't have to be the end. If you leave her, if you admit what's happening is wrong, we can work through this. Together." He lifted his head. His eyes looked hollow, ringed with exhaustion. "She's my wife, Mom. I can't just abandon her." "She abandoned you the moment she drained your future into handbags and spa treatments."
His jaw tightened.
"It's not that simple." "Yes," I said, my voice steel. "It is exactly that simple." But he said nothing more. He climbed into his SUV, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. I stood on the porch, the same spot where my life had shattered just hours earlier. For the first time since my husband's death, I felt truly, unbearably alone. The rest of the day blurred. At the police station, I gave my statement. Every detail. Not just the slap. Not just the shouting match on my lawn. I told Detective Reynolds about the years of manipulation, the slow erosion of my relationship with my son. She was thorough, patient. Her pen scratched across her notepad as I spoke. "Mrs. Mitchell," she asked when we finished, "has your daughter-in-law ever been physically aggressive with you before today?" I thought hard.
No.
Not physically, but emotionally?
Yes.
For years. "Can you explain?"
So I did.
I told her about the missed holidays, the canceled dinners, how every visit seemed to fall apart under Lennox's careful orchestration, how Terrence had been pulled away from me, one excuse at a time, until he looked at me not like his mother, but like an inconvenience. And the finances? Reynolds pressed. "You mentioned the house. The money. They sold their home. $620,000. My voice shook.
Gone.
In just a few months. Reynolds gave a low whistle. "That's a fortune to burn through so fast." "She has expensive tastes," I said flatly, "and no concept of limits, of living within means." "And your son? He agreed to all this?" I sighed. "He's blind to it. Completely under her thumb. He can't see what she's doing to him, to his future, to our family." That evening, I sat alone in my kitchen. The house felt quieter than ever. A cup of tea sat cooling on the table, untouched. Pressing charges had been the first step, but it wasn't the last. I knew Lennox, and I knew Terrence. They would be back. If not with fists or shouting, then with charm, manipulation, lies. And next time, they'd be smarter. My mind drifted to Maple Street. Their house. The home I helped them buy with $40,000 from my retirement savings. Money I had worked decades to earn. Money that was now gone, flushed away with every other dime of their equity. But then, like a light breaking through the fog, something stirred in my memory. A detail I had overlooked. A thread I could pull. Something that might change everything. When Terrence and Lennox bought that house, there had been paperwork. Piles of it. Signatures, initials, legal jargon. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. I was just a mother proud to help her son start his future. But that night, sitting alone in my kitchen with the sting of Lennox's slap still burning on my cheek, I remembered. There had been more than just a deed. There had been protections. Safeguards. Because I had contributed so much toward the down payment, the attorney handling the sale had been firm about one thing. This could not be treated as a casual gift. I went to my file cabinet, my hands trembling, and pulled out the folder marked in my handwriting, Terrence House Purchase. Inside, neatly stacked, were copies of every document. And buried among them was the piece I had almost forgotten existed. A promissory note. I could still hear the attorney's voice from that day years ago. "Mrs. Mitchell, with $40,000 on the table, I strongly recommend structuring this as a loan, not a gift. It protects you. It reminds your son that this isn't just money, it's responsibility." At the time, I had resisted. I didn't want formality. I didn't want barriers between me and my boy. I wanted to help him, plain and simple. But Terrence had insisted. Mom, he'd said, looking me straight in the eye, I want this to be official. I want to pay you back. The memory almost undid me. The note was clear as day.
$42.
5% annual interest. Payments to begin 1 year after the purchase date. And the loan secured by the property itself, meaning I hadn't just helped them buy a house. I had a legal stake in it. But they had sold that house. Sold it and pocketed every dime, never mentioning the debt. Never repaying a cent. My stomach churned with betrayal as I picked up the phone and dialed James Crawford, the attorney who had drawn up the documents. His secretary promised he could see me first thing in the morning. That night, sleep never came. My mind kept circling back to Terrence, not the man he was now, but the boy he once had been. The child who had crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, clutching my arm until the storm passed. The young man whose eyes had shone with pride when he walked across that college graduation stage. The grieving son who had stood beside me at his father's funeral, tears streaking his face as he whispered, I'll always take care of you, Mom. Where had that boy gone? How had he become a man who could stand silent while his wife raised her hand against me? By morning, I put on my best suit, squared my shoulders, and drove to James Crawford's office. James was a man in his 60s, silver hair perfectly combed, his presence calm but commanding. He shook my hand warmly. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm sorry to hear what you've been going through.
Please sit down.
Tell me everything.
So I did.
I laid it all bare. The house, the squandered money, the confrontation, the humiliation on my lawn, the arrest. James listened without interruption, his pen moving across a legal pad, his eyes sharp but kind. When I finished, he leaned back, studying me for a long moment. Then he said, Bessie, do you understand that you have significant legal recourse here? My breath caught. What do you mean? The promissory note. It was secured against the property. When your son sold that house without satisfying the debt, he violated the terms of that agreement. You have grounds for breach of contract, possibly conversion. This isn't just unfair, it's unlawful. For the first time in days, something stirred in me, not quite hope, but stronger than despair. What does that mean, practically speaking? It means, James said, his tone steady, you can sue for repayment of the loan, plus interest, plus damages. And because it was tied to real property, you may be able to attach any remaining assets to enforce a judgment. What assets? I asked, though we both knew the spree had gutted them. He gave a grim smile. That's what we'll find out. But trust me, we'll uncover what's left. For the next hour, he walked me through every option. Civil lawsuit, repayment, interest, damages, and even the possibility of pursuing criminal charges for conversion, since they'd sold property partially belonging to me without consent. I hesitated. My chest ached as I whispered, James, I don't want to destroy my son's life. I just want him to understand, choices have consequences. He leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. Bessie, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to stop shielding them from the consequences of their own actions. I drove home replaying those words, letting them pierce the fog of guilt and grief. Was I truly helping Terrence by letting him fall deeper into Lennox's shadow? Or had I been enabling him all along, catching him every time he stumbled while he let her pull him further down? By the time I pulled into my driveway, the answer was clear. I picked up the phone, dialed James Crawford, and said, File it. File the lawsuit. Against both of them. My son and his wife. They sold that house together. They squandered the money together. And now they will face the consequences together. The morning after I met with James, I took another step I should have taken long ago. I called a locksmith. Every lock on my house was changed. Then I called a security company. By sunset, cameras were mounted on my porch, the driveway, the side gate. I wasn't going to be blindsided again. Not by Lennox. Not by anyone. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Terrence. Mom, he said, his voice tired, heavy. Lennox made bail. We need to talk. No, we don't, I replied. Please, he said quickly, desperation breaking through. She's sorry about hitting you. She was just upset. I almost laughed at the word upset. Instead, my voice hardened. Terrence, your wife stole $40,000 from me. Then she raised her hand against me in front of half the neighborhood. After the two of you burned through more than $500,000 like it was pocket change. There is nothing left to talk about. There was silence on the other end. Then, slowly, what do you mean stole $40,000? I explained. The promissory note. The lien. The lawsuit I had filed that very morning. The pause on his end stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled. Mom, you can't sue us. We're family. Yes, Terrence, I said quietly. We are family, which is why this cuts so much deeper. If a stranger had taken it from me, it would have been theft. But when my own son does it, it's betrayal. We didn't steal from you. His words came fast, defensive. You sold a house that carried a $40,000 lien in my name, I said sharply. You walked away without paying it back. You tell me, Terrence, what would you call that? Another long silence. Then, barely above a whisper, how much are you suing for? 40,000, I answered. Plus 3 years of interest. Plus legal fees. Plus damages for breach of contract and conversion. My attorney says the total is about 60. We don't have 60,000. His voice cracked. You should have thought of that, I said, before you let your wife drain your future on handbags, spas, and lies. Mom, please. Can't we work something out? Maybe pay you back slowly over time? You mean like the original promissory note said? I snapped. The one you ignored for 3 years before you sold the house. On the other end, I could hear his breath quicken. Where are you staying? I asked finally. A motel. The cheapest one we could find. How long can you afford that? A week. Maybe 2, if we're careful. And then, I don't know, Mom. His voice cracked. I don't know. For a brief moment, my heart wavered. This was still my child, the boy I had cradled, kissed, raised. The boy who once looked to me for comfort. He sounded so small, so lost. But then I remembered the sting of Lennox's hand against my face. The smirk in her eyes as she twisted my son against me. And my resolve returned. Terrence, I said, steady, I love you. I have always loved you. I always will. But I will not be manipulated. I will not be stolen from. And I will not be assaulted in my own home. If you want a relationship with me, then you need to face the consequences of your choices. What does that mean? He asked, his voice breaking. It means you must decide what matters most, your loyalty to Lennox or your relationship with your mother. Because right now you can't have both. Before he could answer, I hung up. My hands shook as I set the phone down on the table. Outside my window, the world moved on as if nothing had happened. Mrs. Patterson watered her roses across the street. The Johnson boy rode his bicycle in lazy circles on his driveway. The evening sun spilled over the neighborhood in gold. Everything looked calm, ordinary. But I knew nothing would ever be ordinary again. Tomorrow, Terrence and Lennox would receive the legal papers. Tomorrow, they would discover that consequences were no longer optional. And tomorrow, I would learn whether the son I raised still lived inside the man Lennox had molded. 3 days later, James Crawford called. His voice was measured, but his first words froze the blood in my veins. Bessie, I need you to sit down. I'm already sitting, I whispered, clutching the phone tighter. My investigator has been looking into Lennox's background, he said carefully. We've uncovered some things you need to know. My chest tightened. What kind of things? Lennox has a pattern. Before she married your son, she was engaged twice. Both relationships ended the same way. She'd been using their credit cards without permission. That's why it was made official. And we can prove that. But her attorney is skilled at twisting weak arguments into something that sounds reasonable. So here's what we do. We document everything. Every missed payment. Every phone call. Every attempt you made to work with them before this lawsuit.
So I did.
For the next week, I buried myself in records. Phone logs showing how many times I'd called Terrence about missed payments, only for Lennox to answer with excuses. Emails I'd sent asking about their finances. Receipts of small loans I'd handed them over the years. None ever repaid. Piece by piece, the truth took shape. I wasn't a bitter mother-in-law trying to sabotage a marriage. I was a mother who'd given and given, only to be stolen from and deceived. But Lennox wasn't finished. 2 days before our court date, she crossed another line. I was at my part-time bookkeeping job, balancing end-of-month reports, when the receptionist's voice came through the intercom. "Bessie, you've got a visitor. She says she's your daughter-in-law. Should I send her back?" My heart sank.
No.
"Tell her I'm busy and don't take visitors during work hours." Minutes later, the phone rang again. Jenny, our receptionist, sounded nervous.
She's not leaving.
She says she'll wait all day if she has to. She's making other clients uncomfortable. I pushed back my chair, my stomach tight. When I walked into the front office, there she was, Lennox, sitting in the waiting area like she owned the place. Dressed in her most expensive outfit, polished from head to toe, she looked more like she was arriving for a boardroom meeting than the public breakdown she was about to stage. "Lennox, you need to leave," I said sharply. "This is my workplace." "I just want to talk," she said loudly, her voice carrying across the office. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. I could feel my coworkers' eyes on us, their heads poking up from cubicles.
Curiosity.
Judgment. Our quiet office was suddenly a theater, and Lennox was determined to be the star. "We have nothing to discuss." My voice cut through the air like glass. "Please, Bessie," Lennox pleaded, her tone soft, trembling, calculated. "I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. I know I hurt Terrence. But I'm trying to make it right." For a moment, I almost faltered. Her voice carried such a convincing ache, such desperate sincerity, that it pricked something in me. But then memory came rushing back. The lies, the betrayal, the slap across my face, the $600,000 vanishing into thin air, the smug grin when she thought she had me cornered. This was the same woman who had lied about her affairs, about the boutique, about everything. "What do you want, Lennox?" I asked coldly. She straightened her shoulders. "I want to settle the lawsuit. I want to fix things between us." "Fine," I said, locking eyes with her. "Pay me the $67,000 you owe me. Do that and I'll drop the suit." "You know I don't have that kind of money." "Then we have nothing to discuss." Her eyes darkened. She rose from her chair, stepping closer, her perfume sharp and suffocating. "Bessie, please," she whispered, her words thick with false remorse. "I made mistakes, but I don't deserve to have my life destroyed over them." I didn't flinch. "You destroyed your own life, Lennox. You stole from family. You cheated on your husband. Don't put that on me." The mask slipped. For just an instant, I saw her real face. Cold. Calculating. Dangerous. "Fine," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "If that's how you want to play it, then that's how we'll play it. But don't think this is over. I know things about your precious son. Things that would surprise you." My stomach tightened. "What kind of things?" She smiled then, slow and cruel, her eyes glinting with malice. "Let's just say Terrence hasn't been completely honest with you. About everything." Before I could demand answers, she pivoted on her heels and walked out of the office, leaving me standing there, heart pounding, a knot of dread forming in my chest. That evening, I called Terrence. "She said she knows things about you that would surprise me." What did she mean? Silence. A heavy pause. Finally, his voice low and tired. "Mom, there are things I never told you. Things I'm not proud of." My throat tightened. "What kind of things?" "When Lennox and I first married, I did some things. Financial things. Things that weren't completely legal." Cold fear ran through me. "What do you mean?" "I falsified some documents to get a better loan rate on our first car. I didn't report some cash income on our taxes one year. And when we bought the house, I inflated my income on the mortgage application. My stomach dropped. Terrence, why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed. Because Lennox told me everyone did it. That it was normal. And she has proof. She kept copies of everything. She said it was for our records. But now I realize she was keeping it as insurance. In case I ever tried to leave her. I closed my eyes, the truth cutting deep. Lennox hadn't just manipulated him. She had trapped him. She had built a cage out of secrets and paperwork, holding it over his head like a weapon. Terrence, I said firmly, you need to tell James Crawford. Immediately. Mom, if this comes out, I could lose everything. My license.
My job.
I could even go to jail. And if you don't tell him, Lennox will use it against you in court. She'll ruin you anyway. At least this way, you control the story. The next morning, we sat across from James Crawford. Terrence confessed everything, his words halting, shame written across his face. James listened carefully, jotting notes, asking questions.
No judgment.
Just clarity. When Terrence finally finished, James leaned back, steepling his fingers. This is serious, he said evenly. But it's not insurmountable. Some of these issues fall outside the statute of limitations. Others could be resolved through voluntary disclosure and payment of penalties. I leaned forward. And the lawsuit? He exhaled slowly. The lawsuit just got more complicated. Bessie, you need to understand, your daughter-in-law isn't simply trying to dodge repayment. She's trying to annihilate your son's reputation. She's punishing him for leaving. This stopped being about money a long time ago. This is about control. As we left his office, I realized the truth. Lennox wasn't just a manipulator. She was a predator. And she was willing to burn everything and everyone just to win. But I wasn't the same woman who had opened her door to her son and daughter-in-law 3 weeks ago. I was no longer naive, no longer afraid. I was stronger, angrier. And I would protect my son, no matter what it cost. The war was far from over. But for the first time, I felt the fire in me that whispered, we might actually win. When court day arrived, I was struck by how small the room felt. Worn wooden benches, fluorescent lights that washed the life out of everyone's faces.
No glamour. No grandeur.
Just cold, plain justice. I sat behind James Crawford's table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, as Lennox entered with her attorney, a sharp woman in her 40s with polished heels and a stare that could cut glass. She looked expensive, efficient, dangerous. And Lennox? She had dressed the part. Freshly styled hair, impeccable makeup, a conservative blue dress that screamed money she didn't have. She was the picture of a victim, playing her role perfectly, the wronged wife, the innocent daughter-in-law bullied by a vindictive mother. Beside me, Terrence sat stiff, his jaw tight, his eyes forward. He looked nervous. But beneath that I saw it determination. The stage was set. The real fight was about to begin. Over the past week, Terrence had done something I never thought I'd see. He'd faced his demons head-on. With James guiding him, he voluntarily disclosed his financial missteps to the authorities. It meant penalties. It meant a cloud over his career. It might even mean losing his job. But it also meant freedom. Lennox no longer held that power over him. She couldn't weaponize his shame. When the bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise," the room shifted. Judge Patricia Hendricks entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back tight and eyes that had seen through every excuse imaginable. Her presence was commanding, no nonsense. This was not a woman to play games with. Lennox's attorney, Sarah Chin, went first. She was sharp, polished, her every word smooth as glass. She painted Lennox as a tragic figure, trapped, misunderstood, battered by a cruel mother-in-law who never accepted her. "Your Honor," Miss Chin began, her voice soaked in practiced sympathy, "my client made mistakes. Poor financial decisions, as many young women do. But Mrs. Mitchell's response is vindictive, disproportionate. She has hired private investigators, encouraged her son to abandon his marriage, and now she seeks to extract money from a woman who has none. She delivered the performance of a lifetime, making Lennox sound like a naive shopaholic instead of a woman who had siphoned off over $600,000 while sleeping with another man. I watched Lennox sit demurely, hands folded, her dress crisp, her face set in fragile innocence. It was theater, and she was good at it. But then James stood. And James wasn't here to perform. He was here to bury her lies under facts. He walked the judge step by step through the truth. The $40,000 loan, documented in black and white with a promissory note. The 3 years of silence. The countless ignored attempts to collect. The sale of the house without paying off the lien. The slap in front of the neighborhood. Witnessed undeniable. Your Honor, James said, his tone steady, this is not about harassment. This is not about family squabbles. This is a case of systematic fraud. My client was targeted, used, and discarded. She is not vindictive. She is a victim. Then James did something I never saw coming. He called a new witness. The doors opened, and in walked Richard Hawthorne. Middle-aged, expensive suit, jaw clenched. The room seemed to hold its breath. His face was grim, his eyes downcast, the weight of his choices written across his posture. Under oath, Richard told the truth. He admitted the affair. He admitted Lennox had claimed she was divorcing, that she had family money, that she needed help maintaining her lifestyle. He paid for jewelry, vacations, lavish dinners, all under the illusion she was wealthy and oppressed. She told me her husband was abusive, Richard said flatly. She told me his mother was trying to steal her inheritance. She said she needed money to fight them in court. I looked at Lennox. Her face had drained of color. Her attorney's pen scratched furiously across the page, scrambling to control the narrative. Mr. Hawthorne, James pressed, were you aware that Mrs. Mitchell was using proceeds from the sale of her marital home to fund your relationship? Richard's jaw tightened.
No.
If I had known, I never would have participated. And when did this relationship end? Last month. My wife found out. She gave me a choice. End it or lose my marriage. I ended it. By the time Richard stepped down, Lennox looked cornered, like an actress caught off script. Sarah Chin tried to recover, her words quick and defensive. She argued the affair was irrelevant, that whatever poor choices Lennox had made in her personal life had nothing to do with the financial dispute. But Judge Hendricks wasn't buying it. Her face remained stern, unreadable. Finally, she leaned forward, fixing Lennox with a gaze that stripped away every layer of pretense. Mrs. Mitchell, she said, her voice sharp, do you dispute that you signed a promissory note agreeing to repay Mrs.
Mitchell $42,000.
Lennox's voice shook. No, Your Honor. But do you dispute that you failed to make a single payment on that note for 3 years? The circumstances. Do you dispute that you and your husband sold the house securing this loan without satisfying that debt? Sarah Chin jumped to her feet. Your Honor, my client was not personally responsible. Sit down, counselor, Judge Hendricks snapped. I'm speaking to your client. Lennox froze, tears brimming. Your Honor, I didn't understand the legal implications. The judge leaned forward, her tone like iron. You're 32 years old. Are you claiming you didn't understand that borrowing money meant you had to pay it back? Lennox's lips trembled. It wasn't supposed to be a real loan. The room went silent. It was family money, Lennox whispered, her voice trembling. Judge Hendricks's eyes sharpened, her tone slicing through the courtroom like a blade. Mrs. Mitchell, do you see your signature on this promissory note? Yes, but did anyone force you to sign it? No, but then it is a loan.
Real.
Binding, regardless of blood or family ties. The room fell still. Even Lennox's attorney sat back, lips pressed tight. The judge pivoted to the assault charge. Mrs. Patterson took the stand, her voice clear as she described the slap, the neighbors who had witnessed it, the police who had come. Then the officers themselves testified, recounting the scene in crisp, unemotional detail. Ms. Chun tried to smooth it over, calling it nothing more than a family quarrel, but Judge Hendricks shut her down with a single sentence. Counselor, assault is assault. Relationship irrelevant. Then James presented the damning evidence, line after line of bank statements, receipts, credit card charges, jewelry dripping with diamonds, spa treatments that cost more than a mortgage payment, money funneled into a fake boutique that existed only on paper. $600,000 vanished into smoke and indulgence, with nothing to show for it but betrayal. James's voice was steady, deliberate, merciless. Your Honor, this isn't poor financial judgment.
This is fraud.
Calculated, deliberate fraud. Mrs. Mitchell used her husband's money to bankroll an extramarital affair while willfully ignoring her legal obligations to my client. By the time he finished, the weight of the truth filled every corner of that courtroom. The judge called a recess. I stumbled into the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. My reflection looked older, heavier. I had braced myself for ugly truths, but the depth of Lennox's deception was deeper than I'd imagined. She hadn't just stolen money. She had hollowed out trust, dignity, and love, piece by piece. When court resumed, Judge Hendricks didn't hesitate. Her gavel of words came down hard. Mrs. Mitchell, she said, in all my years on this bench, I have rarely seen such blatant fraud and manipulation. You borrowed $40,000 from your husband's mother. You agreed to repayment terms. You ignored them for 3 years. Meanwhile, you burned through over $600,000 on luxury, on lies, on an affair. And when you were confronted, you resorted to violence. Lennox's tears flowed, but the judge pressed on, unshaken. I rule in favor of the plaintiff. Mrs. Mitchell, you are ordered to repay $67,000 within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in wage garnishment and asset seizure. Lennox sobbed louder, clutching at the table. And furthermore, Judge Hendricks continued, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office. The evidence of fraud in these proceedings goes far beyond a civil dispute. Ms. Chun looked up. Your Honor, my client has no assets. She has no means. The judge's eyes blazed. Then your client should have considered that before wasting hundreds of thousands on jewelry and spa trips. This court will not reward theft with pity. Gavel. Final. The case was over. In the hallway, Lennox's sobs echoed off the walls, her attorney murmuring in her ear. As I passed, she lifted her head, her eyes burning with venom. This isn't over, she hissed. You think you've won, but it isn't over. I stopped, looked at her, saw her clearly, maybe for the first time without the mask of charm and manipulation. Just a broken, dangerous woman clinging to the wreckage she created. Yes, Lennox, I said softly. It is over. It ended the moment you raised your hand to me. 3 months later, I was on my back porch, watching the sun sink behind my roses, when the phone rang. Terrence. Mom, he said, his voice steadier than I'd heard in years. I have news. Lennox's friend, the one with the fake boutique, was arrested today.
Fraud.
Dozens of victims. Turns out Lennox wasn't her only target. Will that help recover anything? I asked. Probably not. The money's gone. But it means Lennox may face criminal charges too, if they can prove she was in on it. I closed my eyes, letting the quiet of the evening wash over me. And you, son? How are you doing?
Better, he said.
I've got a new job. It pays less, but it's honest. They knew about my mistakes when they hired me, and they still gave me a chance. I've got a small apartment now. It's not much, but it's mine. For the first time in years, I felt a weight lift. Not because of the money, not because of the court's ruling, but because my son had finally begun to find himself again. Nothing fancy, Terrence said, his voice carrying a quiet pride. But it's mine. Are you happy? I asked, almost afraid of his answer. There was a pause on the line. Then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard in years. Peace. You know what, Mom?
I think I am.
I wake up in the morning, and I don't feel that knot in my stomach anymore. No more wondering which bill is bouncing, no more lies about where the money went. I know exactly what I have, exactly what I owe, exactly what I can afford, and that it feels like freedom. I swallowed. the ache in my chest both painful and sweet. What about the $67,000 you still owe me? I've been paying it. Every month. Just like I promised. It'll take years, but I'll pay back every penny. Terrence, I whispered. You don't have to. Yes, I do. It's not just about money. It's about proving to you, and to myself, that I'm the man you raised me to be. When we hung up, I sat in the deepening dusk, the air cooling around me, the sound of crickets rising in the garden. My mind replayed the storm we'd survived. I hadn't recovered all the money, but what I had regained was far greater. I had my son back. Justice had taken its course. Lennox faced criminal charges in 3 states. Richard Hawthorne's wife had filed for divorce, tearing apart his carefully constructed life. The fake boutique scam had unraveled into a multi-state fraud investigation, dragging every accomplice into the light. Everyone who had profited from deception was paying the price. And me? I was at home in the sanctuary I had built, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, with honesty and discipline. That's when my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. I know where you live. This isn't over. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I blocked the number. Deleted the message. My heart didn't even race. Not this time. Because I had security. I had cameras. I had the law. More than that, I had the strength that comes from knowing I had done the right thing. A year later, I sold the old house, left behind the memories, and moved to a retirement community in Arizona. In one case, she racked up more than $50,000 in debt before the man discovered it. My stomach lurched. Does Terrence know this? I don't believe so. She's careful. Very good at covering her tracks. But, Bessie, there's more. The pause that followed stretched like a noose tightening. The boutique, James said slowly. The one she supposedly invested in? It doesn't exist. No license. No storefront. No filings. Nothing. It was a phantom. Just a way for her so-called friend to pocket $300,000. The room spun around me. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles whitened. So, the money's just gone? It appears so. I swallowed hard. And you said there was something else? He hesitated. His voice dropped low.
Yes.
Something worse. I braced myself. She's been having an affair. For at least 6 months. Possibly longer. The man is married. Wealthy. And she's been using your son's money to bankroll the entire thing. The jewelry. The spas. The car detailing. All of it. Just tools to keep him happy. The air left my lungs. My vision blurred. I pressed a hand to my chest as the walls seemed to close in. My son, my hard-working, decent son, had been used like an ATM, betrayed, humiliated.
And he didn't even know.
Does he know? My voice was barely audible. I don't believe so, James said softly. But Bessie, the man Lennox has been seeing? He's ending it. James's investigator didn't waste words. His tone was steady, professional, but every syllable landed like a hammer on my chest.
He was married, he said.
His wife discovered the affair and gave him an ultimatum. That's why Lennox is suddenly scrambling for money and shelter. Her lifeline cut her loose. I closed my eyes, trying to absorb it, and suddenly, everything snapped into focus. The frantic push to sell the house. The wild spending spree. The rage when I refused to open my door. It wasn't just carelessness. It wasn't just greed. Lennox wasn't reckless. She was predatory. She had gutted my son's life to bankroll her affair. What do we do with this? I asked finally, my voice low, trembling. We use it, James replied. In court. We argue the money was obtained through fraud and deception. And we make sure your son sees, with his own eyes, exactly who he married. That afternoon, the process server walked into the dingy motel where Terrence and Lennox were holed up and placed the papers in their hands. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. Mom. Terrence's voice shook with fury. What the hell is this? It's a lawsuit, I said calmly. I told you I was filing it. $67,000? His voice cracked. You're suing us for $67,000? That's what you owe me. The loan, the interest, the legal fees, the damages. It's all there in black and white. We don't have that kind of money. I know, I said. That's what happens when you steal from family to fund a fantasy. We didn't steal from you. His denial was desperate, almost childlike. Terrence, I said firmly, you sold a house that carried a $40,000 lien in my name. You sold it without paying me back. In the eyes of the law, that's conversion of secured property. In the background, I could hear Lennox screaming, her voice sharp, venomous. Terrence came back on the line, his words tight with humiliation. She wants to know if you've lost your mind. Tell your wife, I said coldly, that I've never been more sane in my life. And I'm done being robbed. I'm done being hit. Mom, please, we can work something out.
No, Terence.
That time is gone. The time to work it out was 3 years ago, when you missed your first payment. Or 6 months ago, when you sold a house. Or last week, when you stood in my yard begging for help after squandering $600,000. No more second chances. Not from me. What do you want us to do? His voice broke. We're living in a motel. I want you to get jobs. To stand on your own 2 feet for once. Lennox can't work, he stammered. She's never had a job. Then it's time she learned. You don't understand, he pleaded. She's not capable of working some minimum wage job. She's what? I snapped. Too good to work? Too precious to contribute to her own survival. The line went quiet. When Terrence spoke again, his voice was hollow. She says she'll countersue. Emotional distress. Something like that. I almost laughed. Let her try. I've got witnesses who saw her attack me. I've got documents proving the money trail. What does she have? Lies. I heard more screaming in the background. Then Terrence returned, his voice weak. She wants to know why you're doing this to us. Because you need to learn, I said. Both of you. Actions have consequences. And, Terrence, there's something else you need to know. What?
His voice was wary.
I hesitated. This was the... She called me every name she could think of, her voice ragged with fury. Terrence, I said quietly, cutting through the storm. Ask her about Richard Hawthorne. The screaming cut off. Silence fell like a blade. Who is Richard Hawthorne? Terrence asked, his voice trembling. Ask your wife. I heard muffled voices. The shuffle of panic. Then Terrence's voice again. She says she doesn't know anyone by that name.
He's 52, I said.
Owns a construction company. Drives a black Mercedes. He's been paying for her jewelry, her spa trips, her little luxuries. His wife found out last week. She ended it. That's why Lennox came crawling back to you. The line went dead quiet. This silence was heavier than all the others. This one felt like the world shifting beneath us. It stretched so long I wondered if Terrence had dropped the phone, or if he was simply sitting there, staring at the wreckage of the life he thought he had. Terrence, are you there? My voice cracked through the silence. How do you know all this? His words came out hollow, fragile. Because I hired professionals, I said. I needed to know where your money went. And what we found is this. Your wife has been dismantling your life piece by piece. Funding her affair with a married man. And now he's left her. She says it's not true. Of course she does. What else can she say? She's crying. She's manipulating you. Again.
Mom,
I can't. His voice trembled. I need to think. Then think, Terrence. Think about how she convinced you to sell your house without telling me, even though I had a legal stake in it. Think about the $600,000 gone in a blur of jewelry, spas, and lies while you were working to keep food on the table. Think about how she slapped your own mother across the face, in front of God, the neighbors, everyone, and you stood silent. I'm hanging up. Terrence, wait. But the line went dead. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone, my hands trembling. Had I just saved my son? Or lost him forever? I didn't know. But I knew one thing. I'd given him the truth. What he did with it was his choice. The next morning, James Crawford called. Bessie, he said, his voice measured, your son called my office this morning. He asked to meet. Meet about what?
He didn't say.
But he sounded different. Broken. Or maybe awake. We scheduled for that afternoon. I arrived early. My heart pounded like a drum as I sat in the waiting room. When Terrence walked in, I barely recognized him. He had always been lean, but now he looked drained, worn down to bone and shadow. His shirt hung loose. His skin was pale. His eyes, sunken, rimmed with red, made him look a decade older. Hello, Mom, he whispered, sitting across from me. Hello, Terrence. James sat behind his desk, legal pad in hand. He looked at my son. You said you wanted to talk about the lawsuit. I want to know everything, Terrence said. His voice was low, but steady. All of it. What my wife has done. So James laid it out. One fact after another. The hotel receipts. The credit card charges. The affair with Richard Hawthorne. The boutique that never existed, just a funnel to siphon money to a friend. The debts with old boyfriends. The trail of deception, longer than we ever imagined. Each revelation cut deeper. I watched my son sink lower in his chair, as though every word piled another stone on his shoulders. By the end, he wasn't speaking. He just stared at his hands, tears sliding silently down his face. Where is she? I asked softly. At the motel, he murmured. She doesn't know I'm here. What will you do? He lifted his head, eyes bloodshot and hollow. I don't know, Mom. I don't know anything anymore. My marriage, my life, everything I thought I knew, it's all been a lie. I'm sorry, sweetheart. More than you know. She's been stealing from me for years. Not just spending money. Lying. Hiding.
Cheating.
And when you tried to warn me, I chose her over you. You were manipulated, I said gently. By someone who's skilled at manipulation. That isn't your fault. Yes, it is, he shot back. I'm 35 years old. I should have seen it. I should have asked why she never worked. Why she always wanted more. Why she was so eager to sell that house. James cleared his throat, leaning forward. Terrence, the real question now is what you want to do about the lawsuit. Your mother is entitled to repayment, but we could discuss a payment plan. No, Terrence cut him off. His voice sharpened with sudden conviction. She deserves to be paid in full. Immediately. Son, you don't have that kind of money, I said softly. I'll get it. I'll take out a loan. I'll work nights, weekends. I'll sell whatever I can. Mom, you've protected me my whole life, and I repaid you by letting her rob you. By letting her humiliate you. I won't fight this. You deserve every cent. Tears burned in my eyes. Terrence. And Mom, he swallowed hard. I want you to know something. I'm filing for divorce.
Today.
I can't live with someone who's lied to me about everything. Relief surged through me, so strong it felt like air flooding my lungs after drowning. And Lennox? I asked quietly.
His jaw tightened.
That's not my problem anymore. She's an adult. She made her choices. Let her choke on them. We left James's office together, walking out into the sunlight. At my car, Terrence stopped. His face was streaked, his voice raw. Mom, he said, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't undo. But I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. I reached up, my hand trembling as I touched his cheek, like I had so many times when he was a little boy afraid of the dark. You already are, sweetheart. You already are, I whispered to my son as he walked away. Driving home that night, I felt something I hadn't touched in years. Hope. Not just the fragile hope of recovering money I was owed, but something far greater. Hope that I had begun to reclaim my son. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the boy I raised wasn't gone forever. But under that flicker of light lived a darker certainty. Lennox would not go quietly. A woman who had spent her life surviving on lies and manipulation doesn't bow out with grace. She fights. She claws. She destroys. And when she strikes back, it's never clean. It's ugly. I was right to be afraid. The real battle had only just begun. 3 days after Terrence filed for divorce, the storm arrived. At 6 a.m, I woke to the sound of furious pounding on my front door. Each bang shook the frame like a hammer against wood. I crept to the peephole. Lennox stood on my porch like a ghost that had clawed its way out of a nightmare. Yesterday's clothes hung off her like rags. Her hair was tangled, matted. Black mascara streaked down her cheeks in crooked rivers. Her eyes were wild. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Bessie," she shrieked, voice echoing through the neighborhood. "I know you're in there. Open this door right now." I didn't move. My new security cameras were already recording. Every word, every gesture, every ounce of her rage was being documented. And I had no intention of letting her cross that threshold. "You destroyed my marriage," she screamed again, her fists beating against the wood. "You turned my husband against me with your lies." Across the street, Mrs. Patterson's porch light blinked on. 2 houses down, the Johnsons' dog erupted in frantic barking. The whole block was waking up. I picked up my phone and held it ready, thumb hovering over 911. "I'm not leaving until you talk to me," Lennox wailed. "You owe me that much." I pressed the intercom button. My voice came out steady, cold. "Lennox, leave my property now. If you don't, I'll call the police." "Good. Call them," she spat. "Let them hear how you destroyed an innocent woman's life." Innocent. The word nearly made me laugh, if the situation hadn't been so pitiful. "You have 30 seconds, I said flatly. "Get off my property." Her reply was pure defiance.
No.
"I'm not going anywhere until you admit what you've done." Enough. I dialed 911. My voice was crisp, rehearsed. "This is Bessie Mitchell, Elm Street. The woman who assaulted me last week is back on my property. She's refusing to leave. She's causing a disturbance." The dispatcher promised help was on the way. Lennox must have overheard, because her pounding grew frantic, louder, like she wanted to break the door down with her bare hands. "You can't hide behind the police forever, Bessie," she screamed. "Everyone's going to know who you really are." Then she did something I hadn't expected. She began airing our private hell for the entire street to hear. "This woman turned her own son against his wife," she howled. "She hired private investigators to spy on us. She's trying to steal our money." Through the window, I saw neighbors gathering on their porches, phones raised, recording. Faces curious, judgmental, entertained. This was Lennox's strategy, humiliation. If she couldn't win in private, she would drag me through the dirt in public. "She's jealous," Lennox screamed. "Jealous that her son loves me more than her. She can't stand that he chose me, so she's trying to destroy our marriage." Just then, red and blue lights flooded the street. A cruiser pulled up. Officer Martinez stepped out, the same woman who had responded before, this time with a tall male officer whose name tag read Johnson. "Ma'am," Martinez said firmly, walking toward Lennox. "You need to calm down and step away from the door." "I'm not doing anything wrong," Lennox shot back. Her hands flew wildly as she spoke. "I'm just trying to talk to my mother-in-law." "Mrs. Mitchell has asked you to leave her property," Martinez said evenly. "You need to comply." "She's destroying my family," Lennox screamed. "She hired investigators to spy on me and my husband." Officer Johnson's tone was sharper. "Ma'am, what Mrs. Mitchell chooses to do with her own money is none of your concern. This is her home. She has every right to ask you to leave." "She's lying about me," Lennox's voice cracked. "She's telling people I'm having an affair." Martinez glanced at her notepad. "Ma'am, are you Lennox Mitchell? The woman arrested here last week for assault." "It wasn't assault. It was barely a tap." "You slapped Mrs. Mitchell in the face," Martinez replied coolly. The patrol car pulled away with Lennox, still sobbing on the curb. I stood by the window, my chest tight, relief battling exhaustion. Then I picked up my phone and called Terrence. He answered immediately.
"Mom."
"I heard.
"I'm so sorry."
I told her to stay away from you." "Where is she staying now?"
I asked.
"I don't know," he admitted. "After I filed for divorce yesterday, I told her she had to leave the motel. I couldn't keep paying for both of us anymore. And you have no idea where she went. She mentioned maybe crashing with that friend, the one tied to the fake boutique. But honestly, Mom, I don't care. I'm done being responsible for her mess. I closed my eyes, pride swelling. This was the son I remembered. The boy who owned his choices instead of hiding behind excuses. How are you holding up? I asked. I'm at a weekly motel across town. It's not much, but it's clean, and I can cover it while I figure out what's next. I've been working overtime trying to save up, so I can pay you back. Terrence, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He cut me off, his voice firm. Mom, I let her steal from you. I stood by while she hurt you. I have to make it right. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. James Crawford's voice was low, serious. Bessie, we got a problem. Lennox has hired an attorney. I thought she didn't have money for that. She doesn't. But she found someone willing to take the case on contingency. They're claiming your lawsuit is harassment. That you're using the legal system to interfere in her marriage. I felt my blood pressure spike. That's ridiculous. I know, James said calmly. But we need to be ready. They're also arguing the promissory note was invalid because you're family, and they'll claim there was never any intention to collect. There was absolutely an intention to collect. The desert sun was warm, the nights clear, the mountains always watching in the distance. I bought a small condo with a balcony that caught the sunrise. Mornings I spent with my hands in the soil of a new garden. Afternoons were for books by the pool or quiet laughter with neighbors who had weathered their own storms. Terrence came to visit twice a month. He flew in from Chicago, where he'd built a new life, steady work, real friends, no shadows clinging to his shoulders. We never mentioned Lennox. I never asked. He never offered. Some chapters in life don't deserve to be reopened. One evening, as I watered my roses, the scent rising heavy in the cool air, I heard my neighbor Margaret call over the fence. Bessie, someone's at your door. A young woman. Looks upset. My stomach clenched. My first thought was Lennox, that ghost refusing to die. But when I rounded the front path, I stopped. It wasn't her. A woman in her 20s stood on my porch. Brown hair pulled back, eyes tired, shoulders hunched under invisible weight. Mrs. Mitchell? She asked softly. My name is Jennifer. I know this is strange, but I need to talk to you. About Lennox. I studied her face. There was something hauntingly familiar in her features. The same sharp cheekbones, the same restless eyes. How do you know Lennox? I asked. She's my sister, Jennifer said, her voice breaking. And she's been doing to other families what she did to yours. We sat on my small patio under the fading light. She told me her story, and it was like hearing an echo of my own. After the charges in Chicago, Lennox had vanished to Florida under a new name. She had spun the same tragic tale, an ex-husband who abused her, a cruel mother-in-law who stole from her, false accusations she was fighting in court. She was engaged again, this time to another wealthy man who thought he was rescuing her. I've been trying to warn people, Jennifer said, her hands twisting in her lap. But she's so good at it. She makes everyone believe she's the victim. I leaned forward. And what do you want from me? Jennifer met my eyes. Her expression was desperate, pleading. Help. You're the only one who ever stood up to her and won. I made us tea. Simple bags, hot water, the steam fogging the kitchen window while the day cooled into evening. Jennifer sat at my small table and listened. I told her everything. I told her about the investigation, the phone calls, the receipts, the man in the expensive suit who finally admitted the truth. I told her about the promissory note tucked in my file cabinet and how the attorney had insisted on it, like a lifeline I'd only later needed. I told her about the lawsuit, the court, Judge Hendrick's gavel. I told her how I kept every scrap of paper, every email, every missed payment logged so there would be proof when the story started changing. The key, I said, pouring another cup, is this: you can't save someone from their own choices. You can't yank them back from the cliff if they refuse to step away. What you can do is protect yourself and the people you love. Document. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. Don't let guilt or the idea of family first silence you when you know someone is being harmed. Jennifer wanted to know how I kept going, how I stayed steady when the world got loud and ugly. So I told her about small things that kept me anchored, calling a lawyer the minute I suspected fraud, changing the locks when I felt unsafe, installing cameras so nobody could rewrite the scene. I told her about calling 911 when I needed to, and about how it felt to stand up in a courtroom and not let a smooth story hide a lifetime of theft. I told her how shame can look like loyalty, and how sometimes loyalty is the very thing that ruins you. We talked until the kitchen clock lost all meaning. We talked about family, manipulation, and the courage it takes to do the right thing when the right thing looks like betrayal to everyone else. Jennifer stayed for dinner. We ate slowly, the conversation softening into late-night honesty about how dangerous charm can be, how convincing a liar can sound, and how survivors rebuild. After she left, I sat on my patio under the wide Arizona sky. The stars were sharp, bright, and impossible. I thought about the strange path that had led me here. The garden outside my old house, the nights of worry, the courtroom lights, the hard choices. A year ago, I thought my life was simple, set. I had no idea that the hardest fight and the deepest victory was still ahead. Sometimes the most important battles are the ones you never wanted to fight. They come against people you never wanted to hurt, in defense of principles you never thought you'd need to defend. When those battles come, you get two options: surrender everything you've built to people who mistake kindness for weakness, or stand up and fight. I chose to fight. In fighting, I discovered something unexpected. At 64, I was stronger than I'd ever believed. The roses in my new garden were blooming, soft petals under the desert sun, thriving after being transplanted into new soil. They reminded me of myself. Some things grow better when forced to put down new roots. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my place, what would you do? Have you ever faced betrayal or manipulation within your family? How did you protect yourself? Share your story in the comments. Be as honest as you feel safe being. And while you're here, I'm leaving 2 more channel favorites on the final screen that I think will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me through this story.